You wake up at 37, 42, or 51 and realize you've been living someone else's script. The career your father would approve of, the lifestyle that looks impressive on social media, the personality that gets you promoted. You've become exceptionally skilled at being the man everyone expects, yet you have no idea who you actually are when no one's watching. Here's the uncomfortable truth that Carl Jung discovered through his own psychological collapse. Most men spend the first half of life building an identity, and the second half discovering it was never really theirs. Between ages 25 and 35, you construct what Jung called the persona, a social mask optimized for external success. The catastrophe arrives when you identify so completely with this mask that you forget it's removable. The data paints a stark picture. 70 to 75% of people experience a quarter-life crisis during their 20s, most commonly triggered by career questioning. Men in their 40s face the steepest drop in life satisfaction, with happiness reaching its lowest point around age 47. Yet here's what offers genuine hope. Research confirms that men in their 70s report significantly higher life satisfaction than men in their 40s. The difference isn't circumstances, it's consciousness. It's whether you've done what Jung called individuation, the terrifying, liberating work of becoming who you actually are. Jung didn't develop his theories in an ivory tower. At 38, despite being Freud's chosen successor and an internationally recognized psychiatrist, he suffered what appeared to be a complete mental breakdown. He experienced visions, heard voices, and felt as if gigantic blocks of stone were tumbling down upon him. His family feared for his sanity. What makes Jung's crisis relevant to you is this: he had achieved everything American culture tells men to pursue. Professional recognition, financial security, a respected position, a family. By every external metric, he'd won. Yet internally, he was fragmenting. The persona he'd constructed, the brilliant rational scientist, could no longer contain the fullness of who he was. Rather than medicating or suppressing this crisis, Jung made a radical choice. He descended deliberately into his unconscious. For 6 years, from 1913 to 1919, he engaged in what he called active imagination, having conversations with inner figures that seemed completely autonomous. He documented this journey in what became the Red Book, a chronicle of encountering aspects of himself he'd spent decades denying. One figure he met was Philemon, an old man with wings who taught him something that revolutionizes how you understand your own mind. Your thoughts and emotions have autonomous existence independent of your conscious control. They're not fully yours in the way you imagine. Parts of your psyche operate with their own intelligence, their own agendas, completely outside your awareness. This realization is simultaneously humbling and liberating. You're not the unified, rational agent you believe yourself to be. You're a multiplicity. And the parts you refuse to acknowledge consciously will run your life unconsciously. Jung's entire psychological system emerged from this lived experience of confronting what he'd rejected in himself. Let's address something specific to modern American men that Jung anticipated, but we can now measure with devastating precision. In 1990, 55% of men reported having 6 or more close friends. Today, that number has dropped to 27%. 15% of men now have 0 close friends, up from just 3% in 1990. This isn't just loneliness. This is the systematic exile of what Jung called the Anima, the unconscious feminine principle within every man. Before you misunderstand, this has nothing to do with sexual orientation or stereotypical femininity. The Anima represents your capacity for emotional depth, relatedness, intuition, and genuine connection. Think about your male friendships. Are they built around activities, watching sports, working out, drinking beer, or around emotional intimacy? Research shows men compartmentalize relationships, keeping emotional life separate from male friendships and relying almost exclusively on women for emotional connection. You've likely outsourced your entire emotional life to romantic partners, which creates an impossible pressure. One person must be your sole emotional support system. Jung described 4 developmental stages of anima integration. Most American men remain stuck at the first stage, Eve, characterized by purely physical attraction, and surface-level relationships. The mature stages, moving through Helen, romantic idealization, Mary, emotional depth, to Sophia, integrated wisdom, require developing your own inner emotional life rather than projecting it onto women. Consider the pattern of your relationships. Do you fall intensely in love with women who seem to embody qualities you lack? Emotional expressiveness, creativity, intuition. That's anima projection. You're not falling in love with the actual woman. You're captivated by disowned parts of yourself you see reflected in her. When she inevitably fails to maintain this projection, when she reveals herself as a complex, flawed human rather than your soul's missing piece, resentment follows. 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health. This isn't strength, this is anima starvation. Without developing your capacity for emotional expression, introspection, and vulnerability, you become increasingly isolated, rigid, and disconnected from your own inner life. The path toward anima integration requires concrete action. Start by scheduling a one-on-one conversation with a male friend where you explicitly discuss something emotionally meaningful. Not sports, not work strategy, but how you're actually feeling about your life. The awkwardness you'll encounter isn't weakness. It's the atrophied muscle of emotional connection beginning to move again. Jung observed something that developmental psychology has now confirmed. Life unfolds in distinct psychological seasons, each with its own tasks and crises. The first half of life, roughly from adolescence through your mid-30s, demands ego development. You must build a viable persona. You need to establish yourself professionally, develop competence, create relationships, define yourself in society's terms. This work is necessary and healthy. You need a strong ego before you can transcend it. The problem emerges when the persona that served you brilliantly at 28 becomes a prison at 43. The transition typically hits between ages 35 and 45, triggered by career success that feels hollow, relationships that feel inauthentic, physical decline that makes mortality real, or the simple devastating question, is this all there is? Only 10 to 20% experience a full-blown midlife crisis, but virtually all men face a fundamental re-evaluation during this period. What's actually happening is that your persona's limitations become unbearable, your shadow demands attention, and your anima seeks integration. The statistics validate Jung's insight. Life satisfaction follows a U-shaped curve across the lifespan. Happiness peaks around age 23, declines through your 30s and 40s, hits bottom around 47, then rises dramatically through your 50s, 60s, and 70s. The midlife dip isn't pathology, it's the birth canal. You're dying to one identity before being born into another. Here's what separates men who emerge from midlife stronger from those who remain trapped, whether you interpret the crisis as a problem to solve or an invitation to transform. The man who buys a sports car and has an affair is attempting to anesthetize the pain without addressing its source. The man who begins genuine inner work, therapy, shadow integration, questioning his life's assumptions, uses the crisis as a doorway. Research shows men who make career changes during midlife, aligned with deeper values rather than external expectations, report being much happier afterward and demonstrate greater sense of generativity, meaningful contribution to the next generation. Jung identified individuation as a lifelong process with 3 core tasks. Unlike the shadow work you may have encountered elsewhere, understand that these tasks build on each other and require years, not weeks. Task 1. Confronting the shadow. The apprentice piece Jung called shadow integration the apprentice piece because it's the foundational work that must come before deeper tasks. Your shadow contains everything you've rejected about yourself, not just negative traits, but positive qualities you've suppressed because they didn't fit your persona. Think about this. If your persona is rational professional, your shadow likely contains your wild creativity, your irrational passions, your need for play. These aren't weaknesses you've overcome. They're disowned strengths operating outside your conscious control, often emerging at the worst possible moments. The mechanism of projection means you reliably encounter your shadow in others. That colleague whose laid-back attitude infuriates you, that's probably your own repressed desire for ease and rest, which your workaholic persona cannot tolerate. The overly emotional friend who embarrasses you. That's your own emotional range, locked in the basement because you learned early that men don't feel. Integration doesn't mean indulging every impulse. It means developing conscious relationship with these rejected parts. When you recognize your shadow operating, you gain choice. The energy that was bound in repression becomes available for conscious use. Task 2. Integrating the Anima, the masterpiece. Jung called Anima integration the masterpiece because it requires more sophisticated psychological work. For men, this means developing the feeling function, cultivating intuition alongside rationality, and accessing emotional depth without being overwhelmed by it. Practically, this might mean taking up creative expression, painting, writing, music, cooking, not for achievement, but for connection to the non-rational parts of yourself. It means learning to trust gut feelings alongside logical analysis. It means building genuine emotional friendships with other men, sharing vulnerability without the buffer of alcohol or sports. The transformation shows up in your intimate relationships. Instead of seeking a woman to complete you, you engage her as a whole person, engaging another whole person. Instead of oscillating between emotional numbness and overwhelming neediness, you develop stable access to your emotional life. You stop projecting your soul onto others and start living from it yourself. Task 3. Realizing the self, living from your center. Jung distinguished between the ego, your conscious I am, and the self, the totality of your psyche, the organizing principle of your whole being. The shift from ego-directed to self-guided life represents mature individuation. This sounds abstract until you experience it. The ego asks, what do I want? How do I look? Am I winning? The self asks, what does life want from me? What is mine to do? How do I serve my deepest values? You move from proving yourself to expressing yourself, from seeking external validation to trusting internal guidance. You'll know you're connecting with the self when synchronicities increase, meaningful coincidences that suggest you're aligned with something larger than ego. When decisions become clearer, because they're measured against deep values rather than social pressure. When you feel simultaneously more yourself and more connected to everything. Let me give you 3 practices that go beyond basic shadow work, organized by the developmental depth they require. Practice 1. Persona mapping and flexibility, foundational. Take 90 minutes when you won't be interrupted. List every role you play, professional title, family roles, social identities. For each, write how you behave, what you emphasize, what you suppress. The engineer who's analytical and rational at work might suppress intuition and emotional response. The good son might suppress authentic disagreement with family expectations. Now the crucial part, go to a coffee shop alone, sit for 30 minutes without your phone. Notice which persona you're wearing. Are you the professional even when no colleagues are present? Are you performing for strangers who couldn't care less? This reveals the degree to which your persona has consumed your identity. For the next month, experiment with conscious persona flexibility. Notice when you're putting on a mask and occasionally choose not to. If you always project having it together, try admitting to a friend that you're struggling. If you always deflect with humor, try responding with genuine emotion. The discomfort you feel is your growth edge. Practice 2. Active imagination with inner figures. Intermediate. This is Jung's signature technique but requires preparation. Don't attempt this until you've done several months of shadow work and have established stable grounding practices. Find 45 minutes of solitude, close your eyes, and invite an image to emerge from your unconscious. Perhaps a dream figure, an emotion personified, or a quality you're struggling with. Don't direct it. Watch what appears as if viewing a film. When a figure stabilizes, engage it in dialogue. Ask it questions. Who are you? What do you want from me? What are you trying to tell me? Write down the conversation as it unfolds, letting the figure's responses surprise you. This isn't creative writing where you control the narrative. The responses should feel somewhat autonomous, revealing things you didn't consciously know. The crucial final step is integration through ritual. If the figure tells you to reclaim your creative energy, You must do something physical to honor that. Take an art class, dedicate Sunday mornings to writing, build something with your hands. Insight without action produces nothing but inflation. Practice 3. Building emotional male friendship, ongoing. This directly addresses anima development and the friendship recession. Identify one male friend, or if you have none, one man you could become friends with. Propose a monthly one-on-one conversation, explicitly framed as different from typical male interaction. Use conversation starters that bypass small talk. What's the hardest thing you're dealing with right now? When did you last cry and what was it about? What do you want that you're afraid to admit? What's one thing about yourself you've never told anyone? The awkwardness is the point. You're developing emotional muscles that have atrophied. After 3 months of monthly conversations, you'll notice something shift. A deepening capacity for vulnerability, reduced emotional isolation, and a model for male connection that doesn't require alcohol or activity as buffer. Jung's path isn't a self-help program promising quick results. It's a descent into psychological territory that can destabilize everything. Let me be direct about the risks. The isolation trap. As you become more conscious, old relationships built on mutual unconsciousness may become unbearable. With 15% of men already reporting 0 close friends, the temptation to withdraw completely during individuation becomes dangerous. Yes, some relationships will naturally fall away, but deliberately building new conscious connections must happen simultaneously, or you'll justify isolation as spiritual maturity. The relationship casualties. Not every intimate relationship survives one partner's transformation. Divorce rates spike during midlife transitions. If your relationship was built on complementary personas rather than authentic connection, your individuation threatens the entire structure. Your partner married the persona. When you begin dissolving it, she's confronted with someone she didn't sign up for. Some partnerships can adapt and deepen, others cannot. This is painful truth, not permission to blow up your life impulsively. The chaos period. Typically lasting 6 to 18 months, there's a phase where the old structures have dissolved, but new ones haven't yet formed. You know who you're no longer, but not yet who you're becoming. Resist making major life decisions during this freefall. No impulsive affairs, no sudden career changes, no geographic cures. Create stability in basics, regular sleep, physical exercise, maintained commitments. Wait for new structure to emerge organically rather than forcing it. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not might be, not could be. The privilege, the greatest honor available to a human being. Before individuation, life feels like extended rehearsal for something that never arrives. You're performing roles, meeting expectations, accumulating achievements, yet experiencing a peculiar hollowness. Success without satisfaction. Connection without intimacy, activity without genuine purpose. When life begins, and this is Jung's essential promise, you're finally present for your own existence. Suffering becomes meaningful rather than random. Joy becomes genuine rather than performed. Relationships deepen through authentic connection. Work aligns with deeper values, even if less prestigious. The research validating this is striking. Men who successfully navigate individuation in midlife report dramatically higher life satisfaction in their 60s and 70s compared to men in their 40s. The U-shaped curve isn't about circumstances improving, it's about consciousness deepening. The men who do this work transform suffering into wisdom, crisis into awakening. Jung asked each of his patients a question that cuts through persona, straight to self. What myth are you living? Most men don't know. They're living collective myths unconsciously, the hero's journey, the American dream, the self-made man, without questioning whether these narratives serve their actual life or imprison it. So here's the question for you. Whose life are you living? Your father's unlived dreams? Society's definition of success? Your younger self's outdated ambitions? Or are you living your life, the one only you can live, the one you brought as potential at birth, the one waiting for you to finally show up for it? If you're not sure, that uncertainty is actually the beginning. The question itself initiates the process. Jung observed, "Who looks outside dreams, Who looks inside awakes. Your invitation is this: look inside. Begin the shadow work. Develop your anima through emotional connection and creative expression. Question your persona and the myths you've swallowed whole. Find a Jungian analyst or depth psychologist. Join a men's group doing this work. Read Inner Work by Robert Johnson, Man and His Symbols by Jung, The Middle Passage by James Hollis. Start simple. Tonight, record your dreams. Tomorrow, notice who triggers you emotionally and ask what they're showing you about yourself. Next week, have an emotionally honest conversation with one male friend. These aren't grand gestures. They're the beginning of becoming who you actually are. The statistics are clear. The majority of men will close this article and return to unconsciousness, maintaining personas and avoiding shadows. Only 7% of men receive counseling or therapy. You're more likely to ignore this than act on it. But some men read something like this and recognize themselves in it. They feel the exhaustion of maintaining masks. They sense the unlived life demanding attention. They're ready to walk through the door that's been open all along, the one they've been too busy maintaining the cell to notice. If that's you, understand this. Your chains are psychological. Your liberation requires the same substance. The door is open. The only question is whether you're willing to become free. Not someday, not when circumstances align, but now. Whether you're willing to finally discover who you actually are beneath all the layers, all the performance, all the years of being who you thought you should be. Life begins when you find yourself. Everything before is preparation. Everything after is presence. The only thing standing between you and that beginning is the decision to look honestly at what you've spent decades avoiding. Walk through the door.